My name is David Miller. I am 45 years old, a civil engineer living in Seattle, Washington. And just 3 days ago, I survived a 7-hour open-heart surgery at Virginia Mason Hospital. The pain still lingers in the left side of my chest. The incision has yet to heal, and my body is so weak that every cough sends tremors through me. But nothing hurts more than what I am about to tell you. It was a Tuesday afternoon. The sky was gray, Seattle was damp and gloomy as always. I was lying in a hospital bed, alone in a cold white room, quietly listening to the monotone beeping of the heart monitor. My eyes were heavy from the painkillers, but I was still aware enough to notice when a delivery man walked in with a large envelope in hand. He confirmed my name and gently placed the envelope on the bedside table. I frowned slightly. No one had said anything about sending me something. I reached out for the envelope, my hands still trembling. The bold letters on the front hit me like a jolt of electricity. Divorce notification, Brown and Tate law offices. I was stunned. Inside was a thick stack of documents, filled with cold, emotionless legal jargon. But in the midst of all that icy language was a single handwritten line. Just a few words, yet enough to crush my heart all over again. David, we should end this now. Emily. Emily, my wife of 18 years. The woman I once believed was the love of my life. The woman I supported in every way, emotionally and financially, for nearly 2 decades. The woman I borrowed money to help open her yoga studio, turned down an overseas job offer to stay close to, and paid every penny of her parents' medical bills when they fell ill. And now, she chose the moment I was at my weakest, lying at the edge of life and death, to end it all. I do not know how long I stared at those papers. My eyes did not well up. I did not get angry. I did not scream. There was only one thing I felt: stillness, cold, and clarity. Because there was something Emily did not know. 2 days before going into surgery, I changed my will. I had met with my personal attorney, Mark Reynolds, at his office on the 19th floor of the Rainier Tower. In a room lined with old oak panels, I signed a new will, one that stated all my real estate assets worth nearly $2 million, including the lakeside property in Chelan and the rental homes in Everett, would no longer go to Emily. I moved all of it into a trust for Ethan, our 15-year-old son, and Emily, her name is no longer on a single clause. She thought I was weak, but she had no idea I had sensed the change long ago, and I was prepared. I leaned back in bed, my eyes fixed on the stark white ceiling. Does Emily even realize? She just pushed herself into losing everything, and me. What will I do with this secret? Before everything fell apart, I used to think I had a peaceful life. I was a seasoned civil engineer, working for a well-known infrastructure design firm in downtown Seattle. At 45, I was not wealthy, but I was stable. Every morning, I drove my faded silver Ford F-150 across the Aurora Bridge, stopped by my usual Starbucks for a black coffee, then headed to either the construction site or the office. Depending on whether it was a meeting day or a project inspection day, I enjoyed the work. It was honest, diligent, and gave me the sense that I was building something that would last. We lived in the north end of the city, near Green Lake, a place with a trail around the water where I used to go jogging every weekend morning, sometimes alone, sometimes with my son, Ethan. He was a good kid, so good, in fact, that it sometimes scared me the world might hurt him. My little family was once the pride of my heart. Emily, my wife, used to be a gentle woman, passionate about yoga, with a soft smile and long brown hair always tied back neatly. She used to teach morning classes at a community center, and over time, she dreamed of opening her own studio, and I, like any typical husband, worked hard to help make that dream a reality. I remember that moment clearly, about 5 years ago, when Emily said, "I think I am ready to be my own boss." She said it with eyes so bright, like the whole world was opening up in front of her. I took out a personal loan of $60,000, signed as guarantor, and helped her renovate a small space on Pine Street. I even installed the lighting and hardwood floors myself. We were not living large, but we had each other. At least, I believed we did. Sometimes on weekend evenings, we would host backyard barbecues. I manned the gas grill while Emily brought out the plates of vegetables and potatoes. Ethan handled the music, usually soft country tunes or Beatles songs I had taught him when he was little. Neighbors would gather, laughing and chatting. And there were moments when I would sit back on a folding chair, looking at my wife and son under the string lights in our yard, and think to myself, this is the American dream. Not flashy, but full. I was not the kind of man who made grand gestures. I did not say sweet things or do movie-style romantic acts, but I was always there. When Emily hurt her back from overtraining, I drove her to acupuncture sessions in Redmond. When Ethan was bullied at school, I went with him to see the principal. When Emily's parents fell ill in Tacoma, I rearranged my schedule to drive 2 hours south every weekend to visit them. I thought that devotion would be the solid foundation of a marriage, that if I worked hard, sacrificed, and kept my promises, things would turn out okay. But I was wrong. Ever since Emily started running the studio, she began to change. At first, it was just the busyness, extra classes, marketing meetings, advanced yoga training in Portland or San Diego. I did not object. I even encouraged her to grow. But then I started noticing I was left out of every conversation. Quiet dinners eating pasta alone. Mornings with no more greetings. Her phone always face down. Passwords changed 3 times in 2 months. Every time I asked, she had a reasonable excuse. Locked it because friends were joking around. Sudden change in class schedule. Clients are mentally draining. I tried not to be suspicious. Then my health started sending warning signs. The tightness in my chest first appeared when climbing stairs. Later, it happened even while I was sitting still. The doctor told me I had severe arterial blockage. Surgery was urgent. I did not tell Ethan all the details. I just said his dad needed a little fixing. Emily sat beside me when the doctor gave the diagnosis. She held my hand, nodded, but kept her eyes down. Not a single tear. Not a single heartfelt word of encouragement. Just a strange silence. The nights leading up to the surgery, I could not sleep. I stared at the ceiling, thinking about Ethan, about Emily, about the years I had lived, and all that I might lose. And so, I called Mark, the attorney friend who had helped me write a will 10 years earlier. I told him, I need to change everything. I do not know if I will wake up after the surgery, but if I do not make it, I want to know everything ends up in the right place. Mark was silent for a moment before saying, "Are you sure?" I nodded. 2 days later, I signed the papers. Just a few hours after that, I went into surgery, believing I had done the right thing. I am not a suspicious man. For nearly 2 decades of marriage, I always believed that trust was the foundation of a relationship. But the truth is, trust cannot hold up forever if one person is quietly pulling out the bricks without saying a word. The first signs started showing about a year before my surgery. At the time, I thought Emily was just stressed from running the studio. She often came home late, sometimes skipping dinner, saying she had extra training sessions for VIP clients. One time, she fell asleep on the couch with her phone resting face down on her chest. When I gently placed a blanket over her, the screen lit up, a message from an unsaved number. "Tonight was amazing. Next time, I'll pick the restaurant." I stood frozen. But I did not open the phone. I did not wake her. I just Stepped back, went into our room, and told myself, it is probably just a student, probably nothing. That was the kind of man I used to be, always trying to see the good in things, even when my gut was telling me otherwise. Then Emily started using a new password on her phone. Every time I brought up finances, Ethan's tuition, upgrading the heating system, she would dodge the conversation. Her go-to line became, "I will check when I have time." But that time, it never seemed to come. One afternoon, Sarah, a colleague who had worked with me on several major projects, invited me to lunch at a burger place near the office. In the middle of a conversation about work, she suddenly hesitated. "David, I do not know if I should say this, but last week I was walking around Pike Place Market and saw Emily. She was having dinner with a man, not a student. They seemed close." I took a long breath. Sarah was not the gossiping type. If she said this, it was because she genuinely cared. "Are you sure it was her?" I asked. Sarah looked me in the eye. "I hope I am wrong." That evening, when Emily came home late, I did not ask anything. Instead, I made her a cup of ginger tea like I always did, and watched how she avoided my gaze when she took it. She used to smile at me in the kitchen, laughing when I clumsily spilled honey on the counter. But now, all I got was a dry nod. I started paying more attention. One Saturday morning, I was cleaning the house while Emily was out for a business meeting with a partner. While wiping down the shared desk in the living room, I noticed her laptop was unlocked. I had no intention of invading my wife's privacy, but my eyes unintentionally glanced at her inbox. One email stood out, titled, "Regarding Asset Division Prior to Surgery, Preliminary Draft, the Sender, a Law Office in Seattle." My hands went cold. My heart raced, and not from any medical condition. I clicked on the message. The content was vague, but clear enough to understand. Emily had contacted a lawyer even before I was admitted to the hospital. She was preparing for a divorce, and she had chosen the time just before my surgery to ensure fair division before things get messy. I closed the laptop, did not save it, did not print, did not take a screenshot. I just sat there, in the quiet room, listening to the ticking clock on the wall, trying to make sense of it all. Why? What had I done wrong? Or was it simply that I was no longer interesting enough in her eyes? That night, I walked alone around Green Lake. The wind was chilly, and a light drizzle fell. I walked for an hour without calling anyone. I did not tell Ethan. I did not text my best friend. I just needed to understand myself. And I realized, if I reacted out of anger, everything would collapse even further. If I confronted her right away, she would twist the story like she always did. I needed to stay silent, watch, and wait for the right moment. The morning I woke up after the surgery, it felt like my body had been run over by a truck. My throat was dry and raw, and the dull pain in my chest made every breath an effort. But the worst part had not arrived yet. That afternoon, around 3 o'clock, as I lay motionless in my hospital bed, a man walked in carrying documents. He was not in hospital scrubs, but a dark suit, polite, distant. "Mr. David Miller?" he asked, voice soft. I gave a faint nod. "There is a document that needs your signature." He handed over a thick envelope, sealed tightly. I took it, a vague sense of unease creeping in, and when I saw the Brown and Tate Law Office's logo in the corner, I understood. I opened the envelope. Inside were divorce papers, and a short handwritten note from Emily. "David, I believe it is time we each go our separate ways. I hope we can handle everything civilly. Emily." No well wishes, no mention of the surgery, no hint of emotion. Just a cold declaration, like I was an old object she was getting ready to discard. I sat still for a long time. No more pain. Everything felt numb. In that moment, I was not angry. I did not scream like in the movies. I simply nodded, set the file aside, and pressed the nurse call button. "Is there anything you need, Mr. Miller?" the nurse asked. I gave a tired smile, my voice still raspy. "A cup of warm water and a pen, if you have one." That evening, when the hospital was quiet and soft lights cast a glow along the long hallway, I quietly called Mark, my personal attorney. He had been someone I trusted for years, the one who helped me write my will and manage my real estate investments. "Mark," I whispered into the phone. It happened. She officially sent the papers. Mark was silent for a few seconds. "Are you ready?" I nodded, knowing he could not see me. "Make sure all the documents are secure, and I want to review the will I signed." "It is intact," Mark said firmly. "She has no legal claim over the assets placed in the trust. But, are you sure you want to stay silent until the court date?" I thought for a moment. Then I replied, "The more silent I stay, the more she lets her guard down. I want to see how long it takes before she realizes she just lost everything." I began recovering from the surgery, slowly but surely. During my time in the hospital, I used every moment of clarity to go through all the financial documents Mark had sent via secure email, investment contracts, the latest trust updates for Ethan, and property records in Everett. I also started looking back, into Emily. I remembered her once mentioning a business loan that needed to be paid. When I asked about it, she said it was for marketing expenses. But now, I had my doubts. I asked Mark to help check our joint accounts and requested the last 3 months of statements from the bank. The results made my blood run cold. Emily had transferred over $50,000 into a private account under her name a few months back, right when my heart issues had begun. No explanation, no discussion. I realized she had not just planned to leave this marriage, she had planned to drain everything. When I was discharged from the hospital, I did not go straight home. I made a stop at Mark's office in downtown Seattle, on the 12th floor of a building overlooking Puget Sound. We met face to face. On the table, Mark had already prepared a detailed legal strategy, step by step. He also handed me a list of private investigators, if I wanted to know more. I did not hesitate. "I want to know everything," I said. "Not for revenge, but to protect what I have built. For Ethan, and for myself." Mark nodded. I signed the authorization papers, and from that moment, the quiet investigation began. Emily still had no idea. She believed I was weak, preoccupied with my health and emotions. She thought she had won. But I was different now. I was healing, and I was remembering everything she had done. A week after I was discharged from the hospital, Seattle was still drizzling, as if even the weather was carrying some unspoken sorrow. I returned to my own home, the place that once felt like a haven, now so cold that every wall echoed with unfamiliarity. Emily was not there. On the kitchen table, she had left a hastily written note. "I will come by to pack my things this weekend. Please cooperate." I did not touch the note. I walked into my office, turned on the computer, and logged into our bank account. But this time, with the eyes of a betrayed man, every transaction, every small payment now looked like a clue. And just as I had suspected, I found a pattern of regular transfers. Each month, small amounts, $3,000, $5,000, moved out to a secondary account with an unfamiliar name, going back more than 6 months. Not just once, not an accident. This was a plan. And she started it when I was still at my most trusting. I called Mark immediately. "I need a private investigator," I said. "Not to follow Emily out of jealousy. I want to track what she has been doing behind my back, and with whom." 2 days later, Mark connected me with Dennis, a former cop who now ran a small private investigation firm in West Seattle. The man had eyes sharp as razors, and he looked at me like he was reading every line of my thoughts. "What exactly do you want to know, Mr. Miller?" he asked directly. "I need proof. Who is helping my wife hide money? Whether she is romantically involved with her attorney, and most importantly, is she involved in any financial fraud?" Dennis nodded and got to work. In less than a week, I received the first report. Emily had been meeting a man several times at a small cafe downtown, not far from the King County Courthouse. His name was Brian Keller, a divorce attorney. He was not only Emily's legal advisor, but also someone she had dined with frequently, even taken vacations with, during the time I was in the hospital. Dennis provided photos of the two holding hands at SeaTac Airport, a week before I went in for surgery. That day, Emily told me she was attending a yoga seminar in Portland. I clenched my fists, not out of jealousy, but because she had lied for so long, so deliberately. In addition, Dennis uncovered financial documents, verified with Mark's help, showing that Emily had withdrawn nearly $80,000 over the past 9 months from our joint account and funneled it into a real estate investment fund registered solely under her name, a fund I had never even heard of. She had not just betrayed me as a wife, she was trying to steal my future. I spent the next 2 full weeks working closely with Mark and our legal team to compile the evidence. We put together a thick case file that included bank statements showing suspicious money transfers, the investigator's report with time-stamped photos, emails from Emily's attorney referencing asset division before the patient loses legal capacity, and most importantly, the new will I had legally signed before the surgery, stripping Emily of any rights to my largest assets, including the property in Chelan and the rental units in Everett. All of those assets had been placed into a non-contestable trust in Ethan's name, our son. She would not get a thing, not a single dollar, not a single piece of land. I had no intention of hurting Emily, but I would not let myself be robbed while lying in a hospital bed, weak and unable to defend what I had built. Every day, I kept up the act. I replied to emails about fair division with polite language, responded to her lawyer's requests with gentle words to make them believe I was still in the dark. I attended my regular checkups, recovering little by little. But in my mind, everything was as clear as a blueprint. All that was left was the courtroom, and I would let her walk right into the truth. On the day of the divorce hearing, the sky over Seattle was as gray and heavy as ever. I wore a light gray blazer, my tie neatly knotted, and walked into the King County Courthouse with a cold calm I had never felt before. Mark was by my side, a heavy case file in his hands. Each step echoed like a bell, less of anger, more of finality. Emily had arrived earlier. She sat on the opposite side of the table, wearing a simple cream-colored dress, her hair softly curled. Her expression was calm, almost confident. Sitting beside her was Brian Keller, the attorney and the lover she thought I knew nothing about. She looked at me and nodded slightly, as if this were just a routine procedure, one final step to set herself free. But what she did not know was that this was where every mask would fall. The judge entered. The court was in session. Emily's side began. Brian, smooth and well-rehearsed, declared that his client was requesting 50% of the marital assets, including properties under my name, bank accounts, and various supplemental investments. He spoke of emotional contributions, career sacrifices for the family, and support during her husband's health recovery. I did not interrupt. Neither did Mark. When it was our turn, Mark stood. He opened the case file and pulled out the notarized copy of my will signed before surgery, the trust plan naming Ethan as sole beneficiary, along with all financial evidence and the investigation report we had prepared over several weeks. Mark spoke clearly that I had executed a fully legal and valid will 2 days before the surgery, in sound mental and physical condition. That Emily had transferred over $80,000 from our joint account to a private account without my consent, an act with signs of financial fraud, that she had begun planning a divorce immediately after my heart diagnosis and maintained a personal relationship with her representing attorney while preparing legal documents. The judge frowned and requested verification of the documents. Mark presented each piece of evidence: photos of Emily and Brian at the airport, transfer histories, emails from the law firm. Emily began to squirm. She looked at Brian. His face had gone pale. The judge turned to Emily. "Ma'am, do you deny having established a personal relationship with your attorney during the pre-trial period?" Emily stammered. "We are just friends." I did not think that was relevant. Mark interjected, his tone calm. "What about the money transfers? The real estate fund registered in your name. Do you consider those accidental?" The judge banged his gavel, calling for order. Then he turned to Emily, speaking slowly. "You deliberately deceived your husband during a time of medical crisis, misused joint marital assets without transparency, and potentially violated ethical rules by maintaining a relationship with your representing counsel. This court will initiate a thorough investigation into your financial conduct before issuing any decision on asset division." Emily turned pale. The confidence she walked in with had vanished. Her lips trembled, and I still had not said a word. Only when the judge allowed personal statements did I slowly rise. I looked straight at Emily and said, "I am not here for revenge. I stood beside you for 18 years, believing that love was enough. When I found out something was wrong with my heart, I thought I might not have long to live. I rewrote my will, not out of hate, but because I needed to make sure our son would not be hurt a second time." No one spoke. Then I continued. "All of the assets, including the real estate portfolio I spent 10 years building, are now secured in an irrevocable trust in Ethan's name. Your name is no longer on any of it. You cannot withdraw it. You cannot contest it." Emily was stunned. Her eyes widened. Brian kept his head down, unable to look at me. The judge concluded the first hearing by postponing the case to allow further investigation into Emily's financial actions, stating that the current evidence is strong enough to dismiss the plaintiff's asset claims. I walked out of the courtroom, the cold wind sweeping through the long hallway, but I felt free. Not because I had won, but because I had nothing left to fear. It has been a year since I walked out of that courtroom, with the image of Emily's face still etched in my memory, panic-stricken, crumbling, and ultimately realizing she had lost far more than she thought. I did not look back. I held no grudges. I wrote no long letters. And I kept Ethan far from the mess. I just took a different path. And for the first time in nearly 2 decades, I began living for myself. I sold the old house in Seattle, the one filled with too many faded memories, and moved to Tacoma, a quiet coastal town just an hour's drive away. Here, I started a small construction consulting firm, helping local businesses renovate storefronts and homes. No million-dollar blueprints, no massive projects, but it was enough. I was drawing again, measuring, calculating, this time with more peace than I had ever known. Ethan visits every weekend. He has grown, more thoughtful than I ever expected. He does not ask about his mother, and I do not need to explain. We fish at the harbor, grill in the backyard, and every time I see him laugh, my heart feels as light as the sea breeze. I also started running again. Every early morning, while the city still sleeps under a misty haze, I jog along Ruston Way by the shore, breathing in the salty air and feeling my heartbeat, steady, strong, alive. This heart, once broken, now beats for a new reason: freedom. I am not bitter. On the contrary, I am grateful for the past, because that betrayal was what pushed me toward the sunlight. One foggy morning, I met Rachel, a woman who works at the little bookstore down the street. She used to be an English teacher, now running an independent shop after taking early retirement. Rachel is gentle, intelligent, and most importantly, she listens. No judgment, no pretending to be perfect. We started talking, then walking together every Saturday morning. No one mentions the future. We are just present. There is no miracle, no magical reunion, just a man, after all the loss, learning how to live again. And I think, maybe that is the greatest victory of all. I do not need Emily to regret anything. I do not need to prove I won anything. This good life, filled with peace, freedom, and genuine love, is the clearest answer I could ever give. When I see Ethan learning to drive, when I watch Rachel picking out books for elderly customers, or simply when I stand beneath the Puget Sound sunset, I think to myself, there is still so much worth living for.